District 22, and most of mine is at the foot of State Street Hill. But then there's, if I understood what I was told right, there's some up at the top of State Street Hill, so there's land in between. How did that happen?
Peter, without objection, Peter.
So it is, District 22 is contiguous, and it does, the boundary does go on State Street for a little bit. It does go up the hill and have a boundary on 12, but all of the census blocks within District 22 are contiguous with the other census blocks. So they're all touching.
So that
So
would
even
be,
though there's no people there, it's still considered contiguous?
Yes. Even though there are definitely areas in many of the districts that have census blocks with no people in them. Often they're right-of-way blocks, or maybe even a block that has a part of the river, but that they still would consider that a block, and they still use it for the being contiguous.
Oh, okay.
thank you. Supervisor Bates, followed by Supervisor Leary. Supervisor Bates. You probably have to unmute yourself.
I'm wondering, Peter, as this went through the various municipalities in the county, if any of the townships or other villages and such had any comments or any changes that needed to be taken into consideration.
Yes, and thank you for the question. We worked very closely with all of our municipalities. Actually, I helped construct all of their ward plans. But they definitely did have, some of them definitely did have input. And the one I'd say that impacts the final plan the most will be up in between the boundaries between 323 and 27. And we have previously talked about this area that it might look funny, and what they wanted to do was the town of Seymour, in creating their ward plan, I would say helped clean up or simplify these boundaries while maintaining those political communities of interest, keeping the town of Seymour's voters in a single ward, rather than making sort of an orphan ward. But this boundary, if you can see my screen, between Ward 2 and 3 in the town of Seymour moved to help them facilitate a cleaner boundary. So yes, we did get feedback and work with our municipal partners extensively on helping create their ward plans.
Supervisor Leary.
Thank you. And my question kind of piggybacks on the previous question of Supervisor Bates. In District 23, which is in mine, and the neighboring, I think of them as kind of like fingers interclass, though some of the borders. So, and I'm glad that they have straightened a lot of that out, because it was very confusing for everyone. But they are diligently building a whole bunch of new homes, and I know that's going on elsewhere. So my question is, are those homes included in the boundaries already, or how do they fit into the plan when there's something new? Two of them are just about ready for move-in. One, they had a family move in last week. So, it's kind of a right now question.
Right. So the numbers, if you can see in here, we have all the census blocks, and they have little tiny numbers on them. They're the count on census day. So what they do is they take that one snapshot every 10 years, and that's the figure we use for redistricting nationwide. And so they really aren't, good, bad, or indifferent, they aren't taking into account areas of new growth until the next census. And so there will be districts that over the course of the next 10 years will gain and lose people. I think we can kind of, estimate where those are
Sure.
on the boundary of the city primarily. But yeah, it's a snapshot on Census Day.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Schroffnagel.
I was muted. Looking at 23 and 27, I thought you said that there wasn't any islands or strange disjointed areas, but 23 and supervisory 3 have little bits of 27 in them. Is that normal?
I'll pull up one other map or figure here that I sometimes can help show it off. So what I'm showing you right now, these are all of the parcels that are located within the town of Seymour. And then this is actually the boundary, that pink line between the town of Seymour and the city of Eau Claire. And if we zoom into some of these little peninsulas or whatever we're going to call them, we can see that they actually are just by little tiny kind of threads. They are contiguous, even though, and that's through a product of annexation between the city of Eau Claire and the town of Seymour. We don't have a sort of say-so in that. So then when you fill it in though with the city parcels, and I think this area was impacted by the construction of 312 and so many other things, but those are residents of the town of Seymour. They vote in the town hall, and so they should be in a ward, or need to be in a ward of Seymour. So it looks funny, but I think that's just the political boundary that we have.
Supervisor Leary, I'm sorry, Schroffnagel.
Oh, I didn't take my hand down. Thanks.
No, did that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm really glad that mine doesn't have the strange delineations that I'm seeing in 27.
It does look like a gerrymander, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. Thank you, Peter, for your explanation. Supervisor Knight.
Unmute. Yeah, town of Seymour looks a little bit scrambled there, but to my recollection, it was always scrambled. So I don't think I can blame Peter for this. It just is kind of an interesting, diverse neighborhood. So I'm happy to live for it as the District 3 person.
Thank you. Supervisor Maury.
Yeah, I just had a comment. My district is primarily rural, but I've acquired some of the town of Washington. And now I'm representing people from 4 different townships. And I like to go to the town meetings, but it gets harder and harder if you have 4 of them to attend. Now, maybe there's other supervisors that have multiple towns that they represent as well. But I know that's not a consideration, but I just wanted to make that point.
Thank you. Supervisors, please lower your hands when you're done. Supervisor McKinney.
Just a question to clarify for me. When these boundary lines change, it could actually change where a person would go to vote?
If a parcel annexes into the city and they're no longer a resident of the town of Seymour, their polling place would then be in a city polling place. So it would be only if the resident themselves actually annexed into a different municipality.
Okay, because it was looking like there's ward changes. And when a ward changes and you voted in one ward and now it's going to be a different ward, would that make a difference of where you're going to vote? No?
Yes, it could. Specifically in the city of Eau Claire, and Clerk McDonald can correct me if I'm wrong. The city runs their polling places, and like I used to be in Ward 9, and now I'm going to be in Ward 2 or something like that. And my polling place may or may not change, but that's definitely, if you're in a different ward than you were previously, then you could have a different polling place.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor McKinney, was your question, how does the voter know where to go?
No, I just wondered about that change, but that was answered. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak?
Schneider with a second question.
Your hand is up. Go ahead.
So once these get approved and all, how do we get a copy to trot along with us when we go out looking for signatures?
We will create copies. We will post them on our website. I believe Sue will also be putting one in all of your mailboxes if you like. And then we will also help you or help anyone who on the next somebody comes in would like an address list for any of these. We can actually create that for you too. So an address list for anybody who would be interested in taking out papers for a supervisory district, we can provide that in like an Excel document or something for you.
Just an, oops, sorry.
Who's speaking?
That was Tammy, Tammy. I was going to ask the address list. Does that include phone numbers?
No. It'll be, I don't have their phone number. It'll be an address list of the single addresses that we have within our real property database. Yeah.
Again, I ask if you're going to speak, please raise your hand to be recognized by the chair. Supervisor Bates. Unmute, please.
Only other question I have, Peter, is whether or not you anticipate any legislative objection to any of the districts in Eau Claire County.
Is that question directed to Peter?
Yes.
Okay, Peter.
I have not heard anything like that. I don't foresee anything like that. As far as down as when the state produces theirs, what impact that will have on us, I don't know. But I don't foresee any objections to anything we've done, and we've worked with the city of Eau Claire and the city of Altoona to help them create theirs, and I don't see any objections to anyone objecting to anything they did as well. So none that I'm aware of.
Thank you.
Supervisor Dunning.
Yes, I'm in District 18, and I was then concerned of the addresses that you were going. Part of my territory is pretty easy, and that shouldn't be too hard. The area south of Claremont Avenue, but the property north, the university students, their mailing address is not the same as their voting address. So I was wondering if that creates any problems as far as they probably don't even have a list of people who were there. So
no, the address we would provide would be what I kind of call the structure address. So it is the address of the resident in there. So that wouldn't be their home address for students. It will be the address of the actual physical structure in the district, not who actually owns it or pays taxes on it or anything like that.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Is a question or a concern? Supervisor Stelches.
Yes, thank you, Chair. District 8. I'm just a little confused on the political boundaries. If you can zoom in there a little bit more. I'm looking at the individual. Yeah, okay. So this section that goes up to the upper left there with a population of 214. Looking at the more detailed map, are some of those actually in the city of Altoona?
No. Nope. Everything in the city of Altoona would be in District 4. Then south of there is District 8. I will say that this is another, we pick on the Seymour area up there. This is another area of what I would consider very interesting annexation patterns, where it's not been the cleanest over the years, as you can see through all these squiggly lines up here. We did work hard to make sure that it was on this time put forward on center lines of roads. So it'll be either all on one side or the other of the road going down the road, versus there are some census blocks that have, natural features or whatever. So like the river. So the river is also the political boundary of Altoona, but then all of the rest of this is on a center line of a road. So you can more easily identify who the residents of your district are.
Okay, but I'm Peter, I'm looking at the individual maps that are posted on the website, and it shows these political boundaries actually creating islands in it. I'm confused as to if it's all in the town of Washington or whether some of that is actually within the city of Eau Claire.
I would have to pull up the individual map of 8. The large one here. Sorry for the. There will be none in the city of Altoona. It looks to me, just looking at this, that there are some that are in the city of Eau Claire, and then some in the town of Washington. That is correct.
Okay, so in this instance, then we don't perfectly follow political boundaries, so we do pick up some of the city.
Yes. And actually,
Okay.
I would say it's, if I remember correctly, it's 400 or 500 city residents in that.
Yeah, it's a pretty big chunk in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's certainly more urban than the rest of the district, which is a little bit incongruous, but I guess. Yeah. Okay, well, that answers my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who has a question or a concern? Anyone else? Okay, supervisors, we will now move to vote. We are voting. Oops, sorry. We are voting on file 66. Clerk McDonald, would you read the top paragraph in the resolution? I'm sorry, did I catch you off guard here?
Yep, that's fine. Approving a final supervisory district plan, directing the Department of Planning and Development to forward the final plan to each municipal governing body, and directing the county board chair to file the plan with the Secretary of State.
Okay, we have the motion. It has been read. We are going to do this by roll call vote because of the importance of it. So Clerk McDonald, would you please call the roll call vote?
Gibson?
Aye.
McKinney?
Yes.
Knight?
Yes.
Anton?
Yes.
Zook?
Yes.
Delgis?
Yes.
Maury?
Yes.
Coffee?
Yes.
Bates?
Yes.
Russell?
Yes.
Smyer?
Last, please.
Oh, sorry. Hambuck Boyle?
Yes.
Neiman?
Yes.
Dunning?
Yes.
Wilkie?
Yes.
Anderson? Beckfield?
Yes.
Snyder?
Yes.
Leary?
Yes.
DeLuca?
Yes.
Raffnagel?
Yes.
Roberts?
Yes.
Frank? Frank?
Yes.
And Christofferson?
Yes.
And Smyer, yes.
With 23 yeses, 0 noes.
It is unanimous. Thank you, supervisors. We have now reached the end of our agenda. Before we adjourn, I would like to, on behalf of the board, I believe, thank Peter for all of his work on this very complicated project. And I thank the board for your time, patience, and attention. We are now adjourned.
This program was brought to you by a cooperation between Newsworks and Eau Claire County. This program is brought to you by Newsworks in cooperation with the Eau Claire Area School Board.
All right, we'll call tonight's meeting to order. Thank you for those of you who are joining us via WebEx. Thank you to our invited guests and administrative staff that's been joining us in person. Are we in compliance with open meeting laws?
Yes.
Thank you. Will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Lyons.
Here.
Commissioner Nordine.
Here.
Commissioner Zer.
Here.
Commissioner Bika.
Here.
Commissioner Clements.
Here.
Commissioner Harder. Commissioner Johnson.
Here. All right, our next item of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. Tonight's pledge leader is Zoe A. from Putnam Heights. Principal Lesneski writes that Zoe is awesome because she brings a positive energy to our classroom community. Zoe is always willing to include everyone and loves putting smiles on her peers' faces. She continues to challenge herself in academics, social skills, and her character. Zoe is awesome because she is funny and an overall joy to be around. Zoe, we're happy to have you today. If you'd like to come up and lead us in the pledge, those who are willing and able, please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you, Zoe. This time we'll move on to the adoption of tonight's agenda. Could I please hear a motion to approve tonight's agenda, to adopt tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Next up is our recognitions for the evening, and with that, I will turn it over to Superintendent Johnson.
Good evening, Chair Nordine, board members, student representatives, cabinet, and guests. We've got 4 recognition items tonight, and at the very end, I've got some, I guess we've got 4 of these to present. So after we're done with all of them, we'll take pictures up front. First off, the Sherman Socktober Service Project. Socks are in high demand for people in need in the community. The Sherman Stars rose to the challenge to collect socks and raise money to buy more socks. Brianna Henry, special education teacher at Sherman, spearheaded this project. Sherman students and staff donated 1,909 pairs of socks and raised enough money to purchase an additional 400 pairs. These will all be donated to local shelters. A big thank you to the students and staff who helped with this project. Secondly, the South Middle School play. South Middle School recently performed the play The Brothers Grimm, Out of Order. The students were directed by Shelby Moore and Danielle Stanley, and there were 20 students in the cast and 15 students in the crew. The play was the first one held in several years. The crew made the tower for Rapunzel out of an old shower. Another highlight was Emma Phillips, a South student who provided live accordion music throughout the show. A sincere congratulations to the staff and students who worked so hard to perform the play and share it with the South students and community. DeLong Middle School Service Project. Brent Wafke, DeLong Middle School 7th grade social studies teacher, received a grant from the Eau Claire Public Schools Foundation. He used the grant to purchase lawn rakes and leaf bags so that students could do some community service in the neighborhoods around DeLong by raking leaves. His students helped multiple families, which was done during a success class that DeLong offers. Thank you to Mr. Wafke and his students for assisting DeLong neighbors in need. And finally, Putnam Heights School opens food pantry. Aaron Anderson, the partnership coordinator, had spearheaded the creation of the Putnam Heights Food Pantry in cooperation with Feed My People Food Bank. The school will be able to offer food items to better benefit an entire family either weekly or just for an occasional meal. Families will be able to request and order their items directly from Putnam. This is an amazing service, and we thank Ms. Anderson for taking the initiative to establish this important service to help families. Thanks again, and we'll take some pictures now up in front if those folks are here. For Sherman students and staff first.
No. So, I'm from South.
We have one of our
Thank you.
no, thank you. All right, thanks so much.
We'll now move on to tonight's public forum. The public forum is a chance for members of the community to address the board. The board provides each speaker up to 4 minutes to address the board. The school board will not hear complaints of school personnel nor any person connected with the school system in a public forum. Tonight's first speaker is Lucinda Kemet.
Lucinda, you're unmuted. Lucinda, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
You can now. Welcome.
Oh, good. Okay, perfect. I wasn't getting response from you before. So should I start?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. My name is Lucinda Kemet, E4715 Queens Drive, Oliva, mom of 4. I have a bachelor's of science in chemical engineering from Purdue and an MBA from UC Boulder. I am speaking to you guys tonight to request that you ask for proof that the procedures you are using for contact tracing and quarantine are working. All good science contains the opportunity for evaluation and revision. I recognize you are following EC Health Department guidelines. However, we elected you guys to provide a safe education for our kids. When healthy kids are required to miss several weeks of school, it strips them of their opportunity for an education. None of us question that kids need to be in school. Attendance has always been a key factor in the success of an educational system. Each week this year, we have had 550 to 800 kids in quarantine and an average of about 50 positive COVID cases. Did the quarantined kids test positive later? Ask for evidence from the health department that quarantining healthy kids is keeping active COVID cases out of the schools. Because these policies have significant negative consequences, the burden of proof needs to be placed with the people enforcing the procedures. So I see it as your role to ask the health department to provide you with proof that these things are working. Second of all, locally, it seems as if many COVID exposures are coming from vaccinated individuals who don't have to quarantine and are not following the CDC recommendations for additional testing. I ask you to find out just how common this is. As I'm sure you are aware, numerous studies are referenced by the CDC, the FDA, published from major universities and entire countries of data have demonstrated that vaccinated people transmit disease and often carry similar viral loads as unvaccinated people. I will be submitting an open records request to determine how big of an issue this seems to be in our district. My point is, if the goal is to reduce COVID transmission, shouldn't we be treating vaccinated people the same as unvaccinated people? Kids are being harmed by being denied an education because we are not controlling COVID as much as we could be in our schools. It is vital that we understand these important questions, and the health department can give you those answers. With my remaining time, I will share some data. Thanks to my education, I'm a critical thinker. I have taken statistics for each degree and use it daily in my job. I read science reports in my job, and I have been studying vaccines since 2009, so I have some context to aid my understanding. According to the FDA, for every 10,000 boys who get the vaccine, 1.8 will develop a heart condition. According to the Wisconsin DHS, for every 10,000 kids under 15 in Wisconsin, less than 1 was hospitalized for COVID in the past month. If we vaccinate 10,000 kids this month, they are 2 times more likely to develop a heart condition from the vaccine than they are to be hospitalized from COVID. Those who want the vaccine's protection against severe illness are eligible to get it, and that is fantastic. I am super grateful for this technology. But the school system should not be offering incentives to coerce kids or adults to get vaccinated. This decision is a personal decision between the child, their parent, and their doctors. If you want to understand where I got these numbers, I would love to sit down with you and walk through it with you. Finally, a plug for rapid testing. Rapid tests are used throughout the region and country to allow people to get back to normal activities. I am vaccinated. My 2 boys are not. For $24, I bought 2 rapid tests at Walgreens Saturday morning. We took the test so the 3 of us could see Elf Saturday night. If rapid tests make live theater safer, why can we not use them to keep kids in school and reduce the amount of time that healthy kids have to stay home? In summary, please ask more questions. Ask for proof from the health department that what we are doing is effective and working. Look for a better way. Our kids are all counting on you. Thank you very much for your time and for listening to me.
Thank you. Our next speaker tonight is Diane Peterson.
Diane, you're unmuted.
Yes, we can. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Diane Peterson. I am a senior citizen, so obviously I don't have children or even grandchildren in the Eau Claire School District, but my tax dollars do go to support the school district, obviously. As somebody on a fixed income, I have some questions about the proposed COVID policy giving 10 days of paid leave to people who are vaccinated or whose children are vaccinated and need to quarantine. First off, where is this money coming from? You're proposing to do a referendum in a year. We're still paying off the last referendum. Is this really the best use of this money to give people an extra 10 days off? I mean, it sounds nice, but is it the best use of the money? Secondly, in regard to this proposed policy, I'm concerned for the staff morale. How are staff reacting when employees are treated differently based on their vaccination status? Are those who are not vaccinated feeling scapegoated? Are they feeling left out? There are legitimate reasons for people to choose not to be vaccinated, including religious or medical reasons, or the fact that they've had COVID and have natural immunity. There are also over 100 openings in the school district, according to a recent news report. You've had to increase subpay to try and get people to work. So are all of these things maybe connected, that people don't like this COVID policy of treating people differently? I don't know, just asking the question. My third point is that I do believe that the policy as proposed is discriminatory, obviously discriminating against people who are not vaccinated. I also believe that is highly coercive and punitive against people who choose not to be vaccinated or who don't vaccinate their children. The policy as proposed ignores the real science of natural immunity, saying that only vaccinations that produce immunity are acceptable. It ignores the religious or medical objections people have to the vaccines. And it does ignore the fact, as the previous speaker mentioned, that vaccinated people do test positive, do get sick, and can spread COVID. So please, I ask you, do not vote yes to this policy the way it is. or even at all. At a minimum, please amend the policy before you accept it so that there is no distinction between vaccinated and unvaccinated people. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker tonight is Nicole Everson.
Nicole, a request for unmute has been sent to your computer and you're unmuted.
Can you hear me?
We can. Welcome.
Hi. So this is just going to be quick because what Lucinda said, amazing. I really wish we as a community could work together as far as what is best for all of us, not just, you know, your way, my way, his way, her way, whatever it may be, and work together and really hear all the different resources. I feel like our community is really dividing. So with what Lucinda said and the last gal that just spoke, I completely agree with a lot of what was said. We really need to take a look at it from many different perspectives and work together. I was reading the company, or not company, but the board manual and information. And one of the things it said is being non-biased and listening to the parents as a stakeholder. And I just don't feel like we're quite there. So my first question would be, when are we going to go back to in-person meeting? I wasn't at the meeting where there was some turmoil, but I feel like turmoil doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing. It just means that we're passionate and you have people that want to be involved. And I think that's important to remember that. As far as the quarantine paid leave, again, the discrimination is very clear. Not everyone can even get the vaccine, so whether you're for or against it doesn't matter. I think we need to support and take care of our staff members because we are so short-staffed already. And we really need to give them, you know, the support that they need. And that is all I have. I really wish you guys would revisit the mask mandate and the mask in all the facilities. I also wish you would look at the mental health and what it's doing to our children, but also when kids are quarantined, how we are supporting them and helping them get back on track. I think education is the #1 issue, and I think we should be focused on that. At this time, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker tonight is Don Lueck.
Dawn, you're unmuted.
Can you hear me?
You're very quiet, Dawn.
Okay, is that any better?
Just a little bit.
Okay. Well, if you can hear me, the first 3 speakers actually took all of my thoughts, and I would just ditto everything they say, particularly that it's very discriminatory looking at the COVID pay for just with the vaccine and if their children are vaccinated. Like they said, there's many reasons to choose not to, and I just don't think it should be a fair justification. That's all for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Not certain if our next speaker is on the call, so Marissa, I will turn it over to you to check right away, but our next speaker is Lori Plackyworth.
Thanks, President Nordine. Call-in user, you've been requested to unmute. Are you Lori? Call-in user, are you Lori Plackyworth and wish to speak? I don't think Lori's here.
Okay, thank you, Marissa.
You're welcome.
That concludes our public forum for the evening. We will now move on to our reports. Before I send it to Commissioner Lyons, I have a brief announcement about to do as an informal president's report. With the Annual school board election period for nominations beginning in December. The board will be holding 2 in-person information sessions planned for the public in the boardroom at 500 Main. They will be held Thursday, November 18th at 7:30 a.m. and Monday, November 29th at 7 p.m. The information presented, which will be identical at both sessions, will focus on roles and responsibilities of a school board member, the board's governance structure, and election information. Packets with all necessary election materials will be available for participants. For more information, please see the ECASD webpage at ecasd.us. Thank you. At this time, we'll move on to the Budget Development Committee and Commissioner Lyons.
Thank you. Budget development met on November 11th. There were 2 items on the agenda. The first agenda item was an overview of the 5-year capital plan. That plan is on tonight's agenda. It's item 9 for board consideration. Second item was a review of the referendum timeline. We identified that we're slightly behind schedule on that timeline, and that it should be presented to the board, that timeline that was presented to the board in late summer, early fall. An updated timeline will be developed for future board consideration. We decided to meet again this Thursday in an effort to keep moving that forward. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Commissioner Lyons. We'll now move on to our legislative update and Dr. Johnson.
The following bills were passed and signed by the governor. Senate Bill 373, now 2021 Wisconsin Act 89, requires the Department of Public Instruction to create an online portal that displays financial data collected from all school districts, county children with disability education boards, and independent charter schools. Senate Bill 555, now 2021 Wisconsin Act 90, adds required content to school district curriculum on human growth and development regarding the Safe Haven Law, if a school board provides a human growth and development instructional program. Assembly Bill 220, now 2021 Wisconsin Act 83, requires schools to annually provide information to parents on youth apprenticeships and creates an exception for providing information on options only available to high school students for schools that do not serve high school grades. The following bill was vetoed by the governor. Senate Bill 454, which would have required a massive overhaul of reading readiness programs, included new mandates relating to screening, assessments, interventions, parental notifications, and reporting requirements, but provided no additional resources to implement the mandate. The U.S. Department of Education releases the following new guidance and resource documents: Return to School Roadmap, Child Find Referral Eligibility under Part C of the Individuals with Disability Education Act, Return to School Roadmap Provision of Early Intervention Services for Infants and Toddlers with Disabilities and their families under Part C of IDEA, Supporting Child and Student Social, Emotional, Behavioral, and Mental Health, and Supporting Intersex Students, a resource for students, families, and educators. The House of Representatives passed the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill. Items of interest to K-12 schools and this federal bill include a total of $65 billion for broadband investment to help families access the internet and afford devices not exclusively tied necessary to schools, $5 billion for clean energy school buses, $500 million over 5 years for competitive grants to schools and nonprofits for energy efficiency improvements, $200 million over 5 years to remove lead contamination to school drinking water as part of a much bigger drinking water program, and then reauthorizes and extends until 2023 the Secure Rural Schools and Community Self-Determination Act, which helps fund schools in 700 counties that have federal forest land, including several in the state of Wisconsin. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. This time we'll move on to the superintendent's consent agenda. The board votes on each of the consent agendas with one vote without discussion. If a board member wishes to discuss any item, it will be pulled out of the consent agenda and voted on separately. Tonight's superintendent's consent agenda contains human resources employment report. At this time, I would hear a motion to approve the superintendent's consent agenda.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
And opposed? I'm We'll now move on to the board's consent agenda. Items on the board's consent agenda include minutes of board meeting, November 1st, 2021, American Education Week proclamation, and COVID-19 paid leave days for qualifying staff.
I would like to pull item 7.4, COVID-19 paid leave days for qualifying staff from the consent agenda.
Okay, Paul, we'll discuss that in just a moment. At this time, then, I would hear a motion to approve the board's consent agenda of 7.2 and 7.3. Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed. We'll now move on to item 7.4, COVID-19 paid leave days for qualifying staff. Commissioner Lyons, I will turn the floor to you to lead your discussion.
So we've all received emails on the COVID leave benefit. We heard some calls tonight about it. It extends 10 days of sick leave to vaccinated individuals. So I wanted to reiterate why I feel this benefit is warranted, but I also wanted to offer an amendment for the action item tonight. So to reiterate, the Eau Claire County Health Department recommendations are that close contact or symptomatic individuals must quarantine if they suspect that they have COVID. This is not a choice that our employees can make. They may or may not be sick, but they are required to stay home per the county recommendations. The COVID leave can only be used for COVID-related absences. And in my mind, this is driven by the county recommendation. The efficacy for vaccines are in the range of 80 to 90% effective. The chances of a vaccinated employee needing additional leave days is substantially lower than the chances of an unvaccinated employee needing the additional days. That's why I draw the distinction between extending the benefit solely to the vaccinated individual. The amendment that I propose would be to strike the language, staff members who are fully vaccinated prior to January 3rd, 2022, and had COVID-related absences, which would be eligible for COVID paid leave days, would be eligible for the retroactive payment back to July 1st, 2021. I would replace that language with, quote, the district will implement the benefit on the basis of vaccination eligibility and or status that was in effect at the time of the leave request. So simply stated, to qualify for the additional leave days, I believe the employee needs to have been vaccinated in advance of the benefit, not planning on being vaccinated at a future time. If they were not vaccinated, that was a choice that the employee made. Not being vaccinated increases the susceptibility to contracting the virus, and we shouldn't be covering additional sick days retroactively because of that choice and because the choice led to potential spread. So the difference and the distinction I'm making is that if the employee has chosen to be vaccinated, the leave days are extended to them. If they took days off because of COVID and are thinking about being vaccinated in the future, I do not believe that those days should be extended for them.
So Commissioner Lyons, I need to have you motion to amend the COVID leave policy, and you can simply say as shown here on the board. Board members, you can see the proposed amendment that Mr. Lyons will be suggesting in a moment as you consider it for a second and then for, of course, discussion afterwards. So if you have a motion.
I would motion to amend that the district will implement the benefit on the basis of the vaccine eligibility / status that was in effect at the time of the leave request.
We have a motion for amendment. Is there a second? At this time, then we'll open the floor to discussion on the motion. Dr. Bika and then Dr. Johnson.
Go ahead.
Okay, Dr. Johnson.
So as a point of clarification, the amendment that's proposed potentially eliminates the perception and or intention of incentivizing employees from getting the vaccination. Am I understanding that particular point?
That's one thing that it does do. Yes.
Thank you.
Dr. Bika.
I would like to hear either from Superintendent Johnson or HR Director Marks if anything like this had been considered during the discussion or the development, or anything similar to this, or what could be advantages or disadvantages from a human resources perspective.
Superintendent Johnson or Director Marks.
So the updated option B that Commissioner Lyons has asked to be modified, the reason that that was put into place between the last board meeting and this board meeting isn't for the purpose that Commissioner Lyons is indicating, where an employee would be like, well, I'm going to risk between now and then and take my chances that perhaps I'm going to have to quarantine or I might have a positive case. And then if that happens, at that point in time, I'll get vaccinated and then I can retroactively go ahead and get those days covered. What the updated option B is intended to do is to say, based on the fact that the school board is considering COVID paid leave benefit at this point in time, if I'm somebody who to this point in time hasn't been vaccinated, but based on what the board is choosing to do at this point in time, I'm now going to say, okay, I'm going to get vaccinated based on the decision that's before the board. That decision to vaccinate based on the decision in front of the board right now can't happen overnight. The days for, if that were me, if I weren't fully vaccinated, but based on what decisions before the board, if I was somebody who's going to say, okay, now because there's a benefit for COVID leave days, I want to get vaccinated. The time it's going to take for me to become fully vaccinated is going to take multiple days. Commissioner, Executive Director Kohler, how many days was that? 36. And that's assuming that you could get in within the next, I think we averaged 2 weeks, maybe. So if I got in within the next 2 weeks to start my first dose, it would take 36 days from the first dose to the end to become fully vaccinated. So the idea was, if the board made the decision tonight to say yes to the COVID paid leave days, and I was an employee who hadn't been vaccinated, but based on your decision to provide this benefit, I decided to become vaccinated, it would take those 36 days to become fully vaccinated. So that's how it got to be January 3rd. And then I would be in the same boat as everybody else who, prior to tonight's decision, could have their retroactive days covered between July 1 and tonight. So that's the premise between what you heard November 1st and what you see before you tonight, was based upon, if I'm somebody who hadn't been vaccinated, the board chooses to make this decision, and I say, yes, I want to be vaccinated. The length of time it takes me to get to that is that lengthy process. So if I'm somebody who jumps on board now and say, yes, I want to do that, the timeline for that to happen, if I'm somebody who did it right away, it takes me to that point in time. And so we're saying, if you're somebody who jumped on board right away and said, yes, I'm serious about doing this, that's how we got to that point, because we were trying to eliminate exactly what Commissioner Lyons was talking about. Somebody kind of went, well, we'll kind of see what happens. And somebody who waits until later then get things, oh, well, went, okay, well, now maybe I'll go and get vaccinated. And by then they become infected and then, wound up taking out some students in the process. And that's what we're trying to avoid with that process and the updated recommendation that you saw before you. So does that help, Commissioner Vika?
Thank you.
So I'll step in here real quick, Dr. Johnson, and then I'll come back to you, if that's all right. So I certainly support this overall policy and giving our vaccinated staff. I don't support this amendment. I'll vote no on it because I look at people who have had that COVID leave, and while I wish every one of our staff members would have taken the opportunity that they've had now for months to get vaccinated, in the sense that any damage that has been done from contracting that and having to be out and potential contact with other staff members or students, I'm willing to, in a sense, let that go if it means that our staff are going to get vaccinated in the next few weeks and make our schools one step safer. Commissioner Lyons, I agree with you completely. That the 80 to 90% efficacy of the vaccine, and especially now as our staff members are able to get booster shots and keep that high. Our staff getting vaccinated is the best way that we can keep our next semester even safer. And so I see it in some way, taking that and giving that retroactive back. If that's the thing that pushes a staff member over that didn't know at the beginning of the year what's the cost benefit analysis for my hesitancy on a vaccine, it may be that many people's minds are made up. But if that's the thing that pushes them over the line to say, I'm going to get vaccinated, that makes our schools safer for our students. That gets us one step closer to being able to go to get COVID transmission down, to find levels where our masks are maybe optional in the future, or just not having so many staff out and having to struggle for subs or increased quarantine as we continue to work with the health department to find ways to keep our students in school along with their regulations and recommendations. This is a way that we can help get more people involved. So I wish that they would have been vaccinated in the first place. I wish that we could just be giving this to every staff member because every staff member made the choice to keep our schools safer by getting vaccinated. But if they're willing to do it in the next few weeks, in the next 2 weeks, get that first shot and be down the path, then I'm willing to say thank you for that because it's going to keep our next semester. So I'd rather have it retroactive if someone makes that decision. In that case, I can certainly see the logic in what and so it won't change whether I vote for the overall policy, however it goes, but I will not be supporting this particular amendment. Dr. Johnson.
I will refrain my comments until based on the outcome of the amended voting. I'll hold off on my comments. Thank you.
Okay. Other comments on or discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, I will call the question. Because this is in some ways a budgetary item and for clarity tonight, we're going to do votes by roll call. So Maida, if you would please call the vote. The vote is to amend the policy as shown as Commissioner Lyons.
Commissioner Lyons,
Yes.
Commissioner Nordin,
No.
Commissioner Zer,
No.
Commissioner Bika,
No.
Commissioner Clements,
No.
Commissioner Johnson.
No.
The amendment fails. We now return to the original language as proposed in the packet. At this time, I would open it. I would probably hear a motion to approve the policy. Once we have a motion on the floor, we can then discuss or potentially, I guess if there was an additional amendment, we could also motion to amend, but I think we need a motion on the floor before we go to discussion next.
So moved.
Dr. Johnson has motioned to approve the policy, COVID-19 leave policy. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the policy as submitted this morning. Discussion on the motion. Dr. Johnson, you had already asked to have the floor after it was back.
Yeah, I know it was reported before, but could we update numbers in terms of where we are in terms of our percentages of staff that are vaccinated, and then I just have a follow-up question after that. But do we have a current percentage?
We do not have an updated percentage of staff that are vaccinated. I know that when we did the survey last spring, Superintendent Johnson, do you recall what the percentage was at that point in time?
I think it was fairly close to 85%.
And then my follow-up question, do we know that the number and our percentages of staff who have sought out any exemptions, medical or religious? Do we have any data on that as well?
At this point in time, I don't believe that they would reach out to our office for that. And at this point in time, we have not had anybody who's contacted us regarding that.
Other discussion on the motion?
Just another point of clarification. This particular policy would not have any impact on what was the terminology? Sick leave banks or something like this. Was that a thing that so that this is something completely separate, and so the possibility of the utilization amongst was it sick leave bank, or am I making that?
You're not making that up. We have a district-wide sick leave bank, catastrophic illness or injury, where employees can donate their sick leave to a staff member who's experiencing a catastrophic illness or injury for themselves or a family member. This has nothing to do with that. They're two totally separate benefits, and they would not cross over.
Seeing no additional comments or questions, the motion on the floor is to approve COVID-19 paid leave days for qualifying staff. At this time, I will call the question, and Amanda, if you could do that via roll call.
Commissioner Lyons,
Yes.
Commissioner Nordin,
Yes.
Commissioner Zur,
Yes.
Commissioner Bika,
Yes.
Commissioner Clements,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson.
No.
Motion passes. At this time, then, we'll move on to monitoring district results. The first item tonight is the full presentation of the R2 academic performance monitoring report. Superintendent Johnson.
Good evening. With respect to R2 for academic performance, considering the evidence that we've shared, I would judge the preceding information is accurate and complete, and the district is making reasonable progress with exceptions noted. I'd like to thank, and I know the board had received close to 84 pages of data on this. There's an immense amount of work in this with our leadership team, most specifically Michelle Radke, who's here and present tonight, Megan Zeke, another member of the assessment department, with the data. Now, ultimately, after we complete tonight, there is no possible way to really go through all this data this evening, but in future agenda items for the results components, for example, on the 20th, we're planning on discussing in far more detail the reading and the writing parts of our assessments and growth and achievement and the demographic data. But I'd like to go through some things with the board tonight in why I judge it to be at that level. We have quite a bit of data from various assessments for the 2021 school year, and that data shared in the report, as you've heard Director of Assessment Radke speak before, this is considered lagging data. And although it was reported in the fall of 2021, many of the assessments reported were administered in the spring of 2021. It's very, to say the least, it was an extraordinary school year. During that school year that we experienced last year, we had almost 2,000 students attend virtually full-time. Except for our first and second grades, our students in cohorts A and B attended school in person 2 days per week, as we didn't have the necessary space for proper social distancing until we were able to shift in early April for our elementary, and then in late April and early May for our middle and high school respectively too. You know, at times we'll talk about how do we stack up against the regional and statewide districts, and that's just what we do as administrators, as districts. But in noticing this, you know, we're one of the largest districts in Wisconsin. Almost all smaller districts regionally and statewide were able to attend school a majority of the school year for 4 or 5 days a week. For the first time, our students and staff had navigated our quarantines, isolation periods, and it's a challenge, very obvious, that continues this school year. Despite the barriers, though, that when we look and we examine at the state and national assessment data, and we're able to do that via WiseDash, it's compared with, when we compare it with the other 10 largest Wisconsin school districts, and we like to look at the 11 UW system school districts, our data shows no lower than a top 3 ranking in forward exam data, and at the very top on ACT data. There are pockets of promise in the data, and even through a pandemic, I think, I know our students and staff have shown an immense amount of resilience and grit under such difficult circumstances. We do know that our progress in the face of the challenges, and we've examined our lower standardized test performance in recent years. We're not shirking that responsibility. We're putting it out there. Student learning loss as a result of the pandemic is a reality. We're not pleased by it. We all agree it's not acceptable, and it's concerning, especially prior to the pandemic. I guess the main questions are, what are we doing about it? What are we doing about this, and what now? And during the spring and summer of 2021, I believe the district took many measures, new measures, not only to help students recover learning loss, but to surpass pre-pandemic levels. And part of it is including implementation of new curricular materials in reading, pre-K-12 social emotional learning, and math. We do have executive directors here. I know we have directors on the line on WebEx if they would like to chime in when we have some opportunities after I'm done speaking. But additionally, we've continued our development of a guaranteed and viable curriculum in all of our content levels across all grade levels through the development of essential learning outcomes. You'll hear ELO, the term ELO, and common assessments. It's critical and necessary work to collaborate that we needed to reestablish this in the district. After we gathered the raw data in June from these tests, and then throughout that planning in late June and early July of 2021, toward the end of that month, the entire system leaders group engaged in comprehensive data analysis of our systems, our academic and behavioral data at a data retreat at North High. And we did that for 2 days. There were some of the system leaders who had left that second day. But what the principals had done, using that analysis, especially on that second day, they developed their school improvement plans aligned to the EMLSS you've heard plenty about over the past few months to increase our student outcomes. We're focusing on the systems. The individual plans were shared with district administration in August to share the successes, note the areas of concern and improvement, and solicit feedback on the action planning. We had every school come in with a leadership team of at least just the administrators, but we also had some staff members join too to share their planning, acknowledge where we're short, where we're really struggling, looking at demographic groups and discussing equity and discussing their action plans. That hasn't been done before. We haven't polled all our leaders like that before and gone in depth. And then conversely, then they've never shared that with the district administrative team. And I thought it was really a tremendous exercise. I think the people who presented, especially the staff members, the administrators did too, obviously, but it takes quite a bit for a teacher to sit up in front of the superintendent and the executive team and other members to be able to talk about that and where we maybe had fallen short, but what we're planning on doing in the future, what they've already begun. So during, at the start of this school year, we've returned to and engaged in many critical staffing and professional development strategies to increase our student learning and achievement. Equity is incorporated into all school improvement planning and all of our staff, as we've discussed from our equity commitment, to participate in PD around equity this school year. Furthermore, we've got additional instructional coaches at our school supporting our staff to incorporate that learning in the classroom. This year, each school staff with that one interventionist or student support specialist to support our students with the greatest needs. That specific programming like AVID at the middle school level, interventions at the elementary, those student support positions at the high school, we're targeting underrepresented groups of students. And we need to analyze and monitor their achievement, to replicate that success. As I spoke before, there are pockets of promise in this district, even in the midst of a pandemic. I could talk about the EL program at DeLong. I could talk about fourth grade forward exam data over at Lakeshore. I could talk about fifth grade over at Sam Davy, where they're getting gains over the past couple of, in the midst of a pandemic, when we're going 2 days a week. And we've got many other around the state that are going 4 or 5. But once again, do we just do that in isolation, or do we replicate that success? So the challenges of the pandemic, we need to be responsive to our staff who continue to support our students in quarantine and isolation. And as you know, if you listen to the media, continuing to provide substitute coverage for colleagues when needed. It's a thing, regionally, statewide, and nationwide. Our school-wide professional development structures in October and November are flexible to support the greatest need at each school. Recently, our reestablished district-wide grade level and department meetings were restructured at the end of September to make sure that we've got staff in the classroom teaching our students. But finally, we expect our actions to focus on the participation, the growth, the achievement, and the opportunity for all our learners. So that's where I'd like to stop right now. And if you've got questions on R2, if I cannot answer them, I really appreciated the work from our administrative team. And I'd like to open the floor for comments, concerns.
So comments and questions for Superintendent Johnson on R2. Commissioner Zur.
You said that you were doing new curriculum in what content areas did you say? Reading, writing?
Over the past, and I'd like to get anybody from the back. We could take Executive Director Van Vliet or Executive Director Schmidt, because they'd be able to tell the exact grade levels and the timing of that.
I'm just wondering what specifically the curriculum is, or what grade levels it's specific to, or what its purpose is, what you're looking to do with it, what it's hopefully going to address.
So specifically, we are implementing literacy footprints at the elementary level, and that supports our reading curriculum at the foundational level. In previous years, there are some newer curriculums that support our ELA at the secondary level, as well as continuation of our math curriculum at the secondary levels.
So what specifically, when you implement a new curriculum, because it's hard to look at the data, it's hard to look at those drops and feel like it's hard because you understand that it's COVID and that there's been a huge hit to our children, and not just to our children and our students, but our staff, and the ability. I mean, when people are hurting in their homes and it's hard to authentically learn anything when we're in that type of mental state, or teach, or we all have to have a lot of grace right now. And I'm so proud of that we're here, and those numbers, you have to kind of take them with a grain of salt, but yet at the same time, I really want to understand what you guys are seeing specifically in what's happening in the classroom and translated in that data outside of COVID, right? And what are you doing to try to change it in the future? And what specifically are you you targeting? Like what specific things are the new curricular measures or the changes in what we're doing in the classroom with the guaranteed and viable curriculum? What specifically we're trying to address? Why are we changing things?
Before I would get a response from any of the executive directors, I acknowledge that, prior to my arrival in 2020, this was a concern. So there's no shame or blame, especially due to the pandemic. But this was something that I know in speaking with each executive director, and actually came up in the interview process as well, in my discussions with Dr. Hardebeck in transition. This was a concern, and it still is a concern. And, adopting a new curriculum isn't going to change things like that, as you well know. But I think one thing that I learned from discussing with executive directors as well as directors was collaboration. That piece had been missing in the past and then reestablished. And talking with Executive Director Schmidt and Executive Director Van Vliet, as well as Executive Director Kim Kohler, principals, Director of Assessment, Michelle Radke, and Teaching and Learning Director Becky Graff. That's one thing that was missing. And when you're not able to collaborate, you don't know what that target is. Those essential learning outcomes, well, if you don't know the target, you'll hit it every time. So if anybody wants, I just wanted to preface that, Commissioner Zerb, before anyone else had shared at the executive team table back there.
I will add a little bit more, and then Executive Director Schmidt or Becky Graff is also on WebEx as well, so feel free to add. As we look at updating our curriculums, that's a regular practice that we want to have in our district, to be responsive to the ever-changing needs of our students, but also as we learn more about what best practice looks like in our classrooms. That's a really important process of having a guaranteed viable curriculum. I think one thing that we look at a lot is the materials that we purchase to support the standards. And as we look at writing curriculum is an important piece. So literacy footprints is an example of a materials adoption that supports the curriculum work that we're providing in our district. And being able to be responsive to the needs and updating those materials is an important part of the process as well. One of the things that we also wanted to be responsive to is not knowing what may be ahead of us due to COVID. We wanted to have relevant materials for our students that would provide an online option if needed, depending on what this year would bring. So that was certainly one thing that we looked at as we are looking at purchasing new curriculums and moving forward, is so that the ease of delivery could be done through a virtual means if needed. I'll turn it over to Jim if he has anything to add of those new last school year.
Yeah, part of the adoption process, as well as Superintendent Johnson said, that collaboration piece, it's as he referred to, that a curriculum itself just doesn't create magic. So it's actually bringing together lead staff from across the district to make sense of the materials, to develop assessments, because we know if you do not progress monitor how your students are doing and have a long gap before you get some feedback on the progress and whether or not what you're doing is making a difference. They have to try to put those things in place, and that collaboration really then defines your scope, your sequence, the assessments, and any sort of interventions you would put in place to try to support students that are not meeting the expectations through what you deliver through the curriculum. So as Mandy said, the literacy footprints is actually just a component of the overall ELA program. It's that shared reading piece. There are other components as well. The word work had been worked on about 3 years ago. So there's different components as they try to piece together sort of the best practices within each area. And then the math curriculum in particular, we targeted secondary and really making the middle school and high school have the same curriculum, the college preparatory mathematics. And part of the challenge there has been that is a very, we know that students, whoever's talking about the math is learning the math. A big part of that curriculum is that conversation that takes place in the classroom. That was a big challenge last year with COVID. It's still a bit of a challenge this year, as well as the coaching that comes with it. So there's been some hiccups in trying to roll that out with the pandemic, but we still working through some of the wrinkles on that piece.
Have additional questions?
The
The
one
floor is
quick
still
question.
yours, yes.
Question. So then you kind of, so taking the COVID situation out, even though it's really impossible to do now, but looking at what you were talking about with it existing before the pandemic, right? And how it really got exacerbated in a big way. What, I guess, how are you hoping, or how are you hoping that this solve, how are you hoping that some of the new initiatives in the curriculum, I guess, part of what we're doing academically, how are you hoping that is going to solve the problems pre-pandemic? Like because I'm assuming a lot of these decisions were made kind of pre-pandemic, right? I mean, some of them might be rather new. I'm kind of trying to understand, are you expecting these to solve that problem? Are you expecting the new curricular initiatives to kind of help with the big drop with COVID? Does that make sense?
So I'll let you talk about it forward, but we're actually in a very similar situation several years ago, because part of the collaboration had to be halted because of the inability to get substitutes in the classroom. We're seeing that happen again. So just like when we tried to retool and struggle to find different time buckets for professionals to come together to wrestle with some of those issues, are the same issues that are in front of us again. So, and that's what I'm going to hand to you about moving forward.
I would say that to answer that question is having obviously a guaranteed viable curriculum is one piece to the puzzle, and having materials that support that curriculum is really important. But it's all of these other things that need to come together to really provide quality programming. So as Jim was talking about the collaboration that is needed for our teachers to help understand the standards and then have a quality resource or material that they can use to deliver the information to students is important, but it's also having the right assessments at the right amount of time. It's the knowing and understanding how our students are learning and how we can best meet their needs. So this is not the only thing that is going to solve our challenges. It's just one piece of the puzzle that we need to take into consideration on how to provide quality programming for our students.
Representative Berg.
You mentioned equity training for teachers during professional development, and I was just wondering, what does that entail, or what does that training look like for teachers?
I can start off where we did discuss this a little bit before. Our system leaders had, in the past when there was some equity training, it wasn't necessarily required. But we made a commitment this past year for all of our system leaders to engage in this work, 50 of us. And then we had, I believe, about 110 of our volunteers, other staff members that wanted to follow us in the training as well, where then they could provide some leadership during this current school year. So we're taking the modules, and if others wanted to discuss a little bit in more detail the specific modules, but there are 4 modules that the staff will then learn on their PDIP days, and not just parts of staff, but all staff, so that we can learn together. And equity work can be very personal. And our staff members, our principals have shared this. I've been witness to it, where they work very closely with their staff and they discuss some pretty sensitive topics, and they're able to do so together in a safe environment, which is with their colleagues in small groups at the school. So that's what we're starting. We had started our first module this past month, and then we've got subsequent modules to follow, but it's what we had done as a group of leaders first, then 110 kind of first followers, and then this year, so that everybody gets that same type of training to benefit our kids. Thank you.
So I'll say, Superintendent Johnson, that I appreciate your willingness on many of the indicators to say this needs improvement. And while we look at across the state or across UW system districts, the largest districts in the state or our regional districts, we can see that Eau Claire is actually, from that perspective, doing well. But to say, well, we're keeping up with our peers is not good enough. And I appreciate that many places where you said we have work to do here. We need to continue to move forward. We need to continue to address our English language arts, our mathematics scores. Just being among the top of the UW system districts isn't enough. We have to really reach all students. And I'm glad also, as a former teacher, oftentimes when we think about how do we get more results, a lot of times, at least in my career, I got basically told teach harder. And I think, Commissioner Zur, you referred to a little bit like how hard it has been for our staff over the last couple of years. And I think we all recognize that and feel that. And so I'm glad to hear that many of the things that you've suggested are not simply teach harder, adding in more collaboration and time for professionals to work together to share ideas, whether that's at the system leaders or principals level to come together and share across schools and then bring that back, or the many ways that content area teams or grade level teams are able to work together. It I think is really, to my mind, seems promising for when we come back again and see this next November, to really be able to say we're making now reasonable progress in several more of these areas. I don't anticipate that anything will be a silver bullet, and I would love to see us making reasonable progress all the way down the board, but we have to take our gains where we can get them. So I just wanted to express, I'm glad that you've looked at some things that are not simply teach more math, go harder on writing, but instead are looking for ways that hopefully have impacts when we work together as teachers and students. So I appreciate that. Are there other comments or questions or discussion? And then, okay, Dr. Johnson.
Yeah, I guess for me, as I don't know, treaded my way, or I don't know what I did through these 91 pages of the R2. I would just I would caution us, results. The results we can make a lot of inferences from them, but results are snapshots on predetermined timelines, whether it be fall, spring, quarterly, and I just would caution, not only through a pandemic, but